This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2-3 page essays on the themes of Masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 273. Just how incapable are women? Removing their rights? Description. This flyer discusses how much less capable women are than men, and whether women should be stripped of their rights and sent back to the home to reproduce more, so that our populations do not get wiped out. The flyer itself. Just how incapable are women? Removing their rights? By Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Not centered as usual. It's not too sensitive. Two MGTOWs I listen to every day are TFM, that's Turd Flinging Monkey, and Sandman. I listen to Sandman because his psychological insights I find valuable. He's quite gifted as a psychologist and worth listening to in my view. TFM I take more seriously. He is a lot more intellectual, with original opinions that at times I find quite challenging. That is, they make me stop and think, because they're fringy and reasoned. They go against my grain sometimes, yet he has good reasons for his opinions, which challenge me to consider my own opinions, which are sometimes contrary to his. TFM thinks that Western civilization is doomed because it is failing to reproduce itself. Statistically, he's correct. Countries like Japan, Germany, Italy, Spain, Korea have birth rates around 1.3, 1.4 children born per woman, compared with a replacement rate of 2.1. So if one does the math, within a mere century, whole populations have been decimated. I have no argument with TFM on that point. However, TFM concludes from this that men need to take away the voting rights and rights in general of women. That is, give control over women to men, forcing women out of the workforce and into the home to have babies, as was the norm in the 50s in the Western advanced countries. TFM says that women are incapable of performing like men in the workforce, and that only a small percentage of women are capable of performing at male levels. It is partly on this point that this flyer is devoted, that is, questioning just how incapable are women and what its relevance would be if women were shown to be greatly less capable than men. My first reaction to TFM's claim that women are less capable than men is, so what? As a masculist, for those people who watch my hundreds of videos already know, a key idea of masculism is that women must FIP up, that is, become FIPs, financially independent persons, or be punished by men, MGTOW style, by not getting one. The opposite of a FIP is a fluffy, that is, a traditional woman who expects to be able to parasite off the labour and money of a man. Firstly, I agree with TFM that women are less capable than men, both on average and certainly at the top end of the performance scale, on virtually any criterion. For example, men are smarter than women on average by about 4 IQ points. That is, the average male IQ is about 4 IQ points higher than the average female IQ. Men have a higher variance on virtually everything, a phenomenon generally labelled as GMV, greater male variance. That is, men's performance scores on just about anything will be more spread out over the whole population than women's, meaning that the bottom scorers and the top scorers will be men. For example, the genii are males, So it's to be expected that men have won 99% of the science Nobel Prizes and all the major math prizes. Men have much higher testosterone levels in their blood than women, so are more aggressive, more ambitious, more dogged, more persistent, finishing off difficult tasks more readily than women, who are more wishy-washy and give up more easily. Men therefore perform much better than women and hence dominate the entries in the Who's Who books. So if one thinks of great individuals, one unconsciously thinks of great men, because great women are as rare as hen's teeth. The term great woman is almost an oxymoron. So yes, women are less capable in general than men. That much is biology. There will always be what the feminists call the glass ceiling, that is, a level in company hierarchies beyond which few women penetrate. For example, CEO positions, presidencies of organizations, countries, etc. This is to be expected, given that women are dumber on average, have a 10% lower IQ variance, and lower testosterone levels than men. Thus women are dumber, less genius, less ambitious, less motivated, less dogged than men. So of course men outperform women. All that is biology, despite the pretense of the feminazis who behave with their child minds, blaming men rather than themselves and their own biology for the existence of the glass ceiling. Okay, so women are less capable than men, so what? What does this female inferiority have to do with masculism or with TFM's back to the home, strip women of their rights view? As a masculist, I want to help free men from manslavery caused by fluffy parasites by pushing women to be fips, to fip up, to share out the burden of earning the living and not parasiting on the money of a man. Even if women on average perform at a 80% or 90% performance rate relative to men, in general, that is a lot better than women simply staying at home and parasiting totally on men. Fluffies are anathema to masculists, to be wiped out by being totally ignored, forcing them to fip up by applying MGTOW tactics to them, that is, forcing them to be manless and hence totally unsupported financially, so that if these fluffies want to eat, they will have to earn their own money or starve. This is my 90% is much better than zero argument. That is, even if a woman's capability is only 90% of men's on average, in brackets, presumably because women have brain volumes 10% smaller than men's, a major neuroscience-based fact and well confirmed, in brackets. Performing at 90% is much better than a woman who does nothing and expects to be paid for by some dupe manslave. Now, what about TFM's much more persuasive argument that it was a major mistake of men to allow women to vote and to enter the workforce in large numbers, because as TFM sees it, this allowed women to concentrate on their careers and hence have fewer babies, which in a century will result in the annihilation of the population. Therefore, women have to be stripped of their rights and forced to return to the home to have babies, or we all die out. This is a much more substantial claim and argument of TFM, which needs to be addressed, because it's more difficult to refute. His argument seems to have force and cannot be summarily dismissed, so how to address it? As a masculist, I utterly reject his solution of taking women's rights away and forcing them back to the home to reproduce. I don't want to see men become manslaves again, being the sole breadwinner of the family as in the 50s. I lived that role with my first marriage and hated it. I really hated it. I don't want to see billions of men being pushed back into the manslave role by TFM's argument. There's a lot at stake here. It's interesting how intellectual arguments amongst a tiny minority of sages, that is, intellectuals, often take on major political consequences down the road, decades later. For example, the arguments between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks before the so-called Russian Revolution, in brackets, a bit of a tangent here, ad-libbing, which was actually a Jewish gold robbery by Schiff of the Tsar's gold. Schiff funded Lenin and Trotsky, Jewish name Lev Bronstein, to lead a Jewish putsch on the Russian people. who then went on to commit the greatest Holocaust in history, killing some 66 million white Christian Russians, says the highly respected Solzhenitsyn, the Russian Nobel winner in literature. That is, the worst Holocaust in history was not committed on the Jews, but by the Jews, that is, by Schiff and the duped Russian Jewish communists. What is going on now amongst a handful of MGTOWs and Masculists in debating these issues will have profound repercussions down the road, as humanity sooner or later is forced to face these issues when reality begins to bite. So, am I stuck between a rock and a hard place? If I advocate that women be FIPS, am I dooming humanity to be wiped out because the fipping of women will inevitably lead to a drop in the birth rate so that we wipe ourselves out? Question mark. You could certainly argue that way, and TFM obviously does. Is he right? The $64,000 question. There seem to be two balls being juggled at the moment. On the one hand, there are strong arguments in favour of the fipping of women to liberate men from being the sole breadwinner of the family, with the awful financial pressures on him to ensure the survival of his whole family, and the harsh social conditioning placed on boys to prepare them for this traditional role of being the sole breadwinner. As a masculist, I want to help remove that horrible burden on men by forcing women to fip up and shoulder half the burden, to accept not only equal rights for women, but to accept equal obligations for women, that is, accepting the moral obligation to get a career-competent education so that women can grow up to be real FIPS and pull their financial weight equally with men. But, as TFM says, the fipping of women will only lead to a below replacement birth rate, and hence the population gets wiped out. What to do? Question mark. I think a compromise solution is possible. That is, keep the fipping of women and arrange things, that is, socially engineer society, so that women do have their 2.1 kids each. How can this be done? Question mark. By creating a new social civic norm that women are to be both FIPS and be mothers, that women have a civic duty to be both. Those women who are pure FIPS, who avoid motherhood, are to be looked upon as poor citizens, as selfish, as not caring about the longer-term benefit of the whole population. Governments need to create advertising campaigns directed at women to, and here's a slogan ad-libbing here, FIP up and mother up. Women are to be treated as responsible adults by society, not as children. Women are to be expected to do two major things in their lives, namely, have their 2 kids for society, for posterity, for the survival of the species, and to become FIPS, so as not to parasite off the money of a man. Women are to be seen as responsible citizens with civic duties, that is, to create the next generation, or the population dies out, a very important consideration that women will understand, and to pull their financial weight and not parasite off a man. For a woman to receive full status in our future society, she will need to satisfy these 2 criteria. Otherwise, she will be seen as not fulfilling her civic duty, and hence not be given full social and civic status, neither by the government nor by society at large. To spell this out, let's do a bit of math to show how practical this double role of the woman can be. Assume the average life expectancy of a woman in the Western countries is 80. She studies career-competent majors at high school and university, getting her bachelor's degree at age 22. She gets married soon after, looking for her husband while at university. At age 25 to 27, after a few years at her career, picking up some workplace skills, she starts having her 2 kids, the second of which will be off to kindergarten when she is, say, 25 plus 1 year for first pregnancy, plus 4 years to kindergarten age, plus 2 years, the age gap between her 2 children, makes her about 32 when she can get back to work again. This gives the woman a career window of some 4 decades before her retirement in her 70s. By staying at home for the 6 years during the toddler years of her 2 children, she will give the 2 kids a solid emotional foundation to create psychologically healthy kids that they will have for the rest of their lives. Need some editing. So women get their kids out of the way early in their lives and while they are still highly fertile in their 20s, and then concentrate on their careers and personal development for the remaining 40-odd years of their lives before retirement. Women want babies more than men do. That is just biology. If women cared as much about having babies as men do, our species would have died out long ago. Modern experience shows that those women who are careerists but childless are miserable. So women, generally speaking, need to have kids to be happy. That seems to be an unquestioned given nowadays, given the extensive evidence that childless women are not happy. Men, on the other hand, are less driven to have kids. So what is to be done with men? The MGTOW and Masculist movements will not tolerate a return to the old tradition of a man being the sole breadwinner of the family. The current financial massacring of men in the fluffy feminist hypocrite-dominated divorce courts will obviously have to go. Men will not be willing to be fathers again unless women become civically responsible. That is, they satisfy the 2 criteria mentioned above. That is, that they FIP up and mother up, and that the gender laws be men fared. That is, divorce laws have to be made fair to men. The paternity rejection right has to be legislated, etc. Many legal and social discriminations against men will need to be removed by social engineering. Once men are no longer financially massacred in the divorce courts, many of them will be prepared to be fathers again. Because many men enjoy having kids, so long as there is no risk of being financially massacred by their ex-wives. So, the Masculist movement needs to really sell the civicking of women, to push them to FIP up and mother up, and to push society to men fair the gender laws. Because if the gender laws are not men fared, then men will continue to reject marriage and paternity so that humanity gets wiped out. But even if all of the above comes to pass, what about those men who are rather indifferent to the idea of having kids? Many men, due to the MGTOW and Masculist influence, will choose to be womanless and childless, going their own way, pumping and dumping women, or living with childless FIP women in the TWEF, that's 2A, 2F, equals 2 FIPs, 2 apartments, lifestyle. If too many men choose to be fatherless, then governments can tax them with the bachelor tax to pay for women on baby farms. That is, women can be paid by the government to be professional baby farmers, that is, to have lots of kids from legally protected sperm donors who have high IQs, so that the government can pursue indirectly a eugenics policy, raising the average IQ of the population, which would benefit everyone, because the higher the IQ of individuals, the less crime, less abortions, less drugs, less high school dropouts, less teenage pregnancies, etc. I think the above ideas are sufficient to refute TFM's claim that women need to be stripped of their rights, especially the right to vote, and be forced back to the home to have more babies. Governments need to men fair the gender laws and create a social expectation on women to FIP up and mother up. To FIP up, to liberate men from being the sole breadwinner with the awful pressures that placed on men, as well as to encourage women to have their 2 kids. That is, it is their civic duty as mothers, their civic duty towards society, to create the next generation. Otherwise, we wipe ourselves out. So, there's a lot of social engineering yet to do. The fluffy feminist mentality of today's feminazis has to be destroyed. That is a job for the Masculists, to discredit the feminazis as genocidal criminals, indirectly wiping out the population, due to their takeover of the divorce courts, making them toxic for men, resulting in the rise of the MGTOW movement, which more directly is wiping out the population. But it is the feminazis who are the root cause, so need to be removed. Governments need to men fair the gender laws, but they won't until the gender politicians feel safe to do so without risk of being politically destroyed by a block female vote to keep their fluffy privileges in the divorce courts. It will be the job of the Masculists to persuade millions of women to become female Masculists, to vote together with men to men-fair the gender laws. Once the gender laws are men-faired, then marriage and fatherhood will no longer be toxic for men, so many men will accept being fathers again because they will not face the current horrible risk of 1 in 4 of being financially massacred and having his life destroyed by his fluffy ex-wife in the fluffy feminist hypocrite-controlled divorce courts. I hope the above agenda is clear and persuasive for you, and if so, then the way is clear on what needs to be done. Summarizing, society needs to foster the rise of the Masculist movement, which needs to persuade millions of women to become female Masculists, so that women can vote with men to men-fair the gender laws, so that marriage and fatherhood can become safe for men, so that men are prepared to be fathers again. Then women can be pushed to fit up and mother up by government-run advertising campaigns to push the civic duty of women to have careers with career-competent educations and have their 2 kids for posterity. That's a lot to be done, a lot of social engineering, so we need to think more about it and then actually do it. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. WordPress, profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. YouTube channels, De Garis Masculist MGTOW Flyers and De Garis Essays. Patreon, patreon.com/profhugodegaris. Minds.com/profhugodegaris. Ciao.